In this lecture of Introduction to Waxing Techniques, we will be introducing some dental instrumentation and waxing tools for you to use for your projects. Many of these will be held much like a pencil, or sometimes we might show you or use what we call a modified pen grip, which you will learn later for holding certain instruments. You want to be mindful of how to hold your instruments as well as your positioning as you work. This becomes especially critical as you start to use handpieces and work on the mannequins, and then on the patients, progressing through your dental school years and beyond. These are the 4 teeth you will be waxing throughout the semester here in dental anatomy. You may notice that one of these is not like the others. The bottom right picture is what we call a die, which is what you will be waxing and shaping your tooth on. This die happens to be for tooth number 30, which is the very last tooth you will wax this semester. The other teeth, starting from the upper left, are number 8, number 4, and number 3. Each of these will be a practical exam in the near future. With the advent of digital and CAD/CAM dentistry, machines are starting to mill teeth and crowns. However, lab technicians are still also waxing up teeth just like this to create functional crowns for the patients and for you as a dentist to put into your patient's mouth and get them chewing and using a broken tooth again. You may not be in school to be a lab technician here, but you will still be rebuilding and replacing teeth for patients, especially as you start to learn how to do direct fillings in a patient's mouth. Waxing will give you a great start to this process and teach you in great detail about the anatomy of these teeth along the way. We are going to start our journey into waxing with the basic skills of how to use and handle the wax and your instruments. This is the first waxing exercise you will have, which we call the waxing block. This one allows you to practice your wax carving skills using the instruments. The next wax exercise after this one is the drip wax block, which will teach you how to build up the wax into shapes so that you can eventually build a tooth up. Simple as this looks, it will be one of the more difficult projects you will be doing because of how detailed and smooth you will need to make this. In practice, your dental restorations will require you to both carve down and build up your materials and restorations in order to achieve a fully restored tooth. So the skills you learn here are a part of your foundation for understanding and for learning your technique. This is a list of tools you will have for your waxing projects this semester, and I'm going to describe the basic uses for each one to help get you started. Much of your success depends on how you learn to control your tools, heat, and speed. It's going to take a lot of practice, and you are going to receive a lot of critiques and feedback. Keep in mind that your entire dental school career is going to be a learning process and that you want to make and show your mistakes throughout school because that's the only way you're going to get better and continue to improve. You don't want to make your mistakes only after you graduate. So again, don't get discouraged if you need to practice and redo your wax up several times as you are receiving critiques. For this first part, we're going to be looking at some application instruments, which means you will use these to apply wax to your die. And the first one we'll show you are the wax spatulas that you will use for rapid buildup of wax. This one is the number 31 wax spatula. It is a bit bigger, so it deposits more wax onto the surface that you want to deliver it to. For the purpose of your dies for the individual teeth, this instrument might be a little bit too big, but for your well project, for the waxing block, those little circle wells, this might work out better to deliver more wax to fill them up. The next we have is a number 7 wax spatula. This wax spatula is a bit smaller, so you can control it a little bit better. This one you can use to start to put wax onto your tooth dies if that is the technique that you find works easier for you. So you'll have different instruments and you can experiment with them and see what works better. The next that we will look at is the drop wax instruments, and these work well for building up cones or cusps onto your dies or onto your projects. We have several different ones. We have here depicted a PKT1 and a PKT2 drop wax instrument. These have pointed ends, not necessarily sharp, but they will be able to get just a little bit of wax and deposit them onto the block. These are only for drip wax, and there is no carving that is done with these instruments. So you won't really be using these for the carving wax blocks because the wells are too big for this to be effective. So you will probably use something like a spatula for those wells. You will, however, be using this a lot to try them out for the other wax block project we have, which is the drip wax block. Next, we have some combination tools. This tool allows you to both add wax with the spade-like end, as well as carve wax away with the kind of shovel-like end that you see on the bottom left. And then we have just carving instruments. So this is a PKT number 4 carver, and both ends have that flat, almost shovel or knife-like surface. And this will allow you to carve wax away from an edge. We also have other carvers, such as the Hollenbeck number 1 or 2 and 3, as well as a PKT4, and here you also see the Hollenbeck 1 and 2 again. So the PKT, the difference with that is that it has a curved edge instead of a straight one, but they are both carvers. Here we have a cleoid discoid tool, where one end is more like a circular disc, and the other end, for the cleoid end, has a pointed tip. So depending on what you are carving, this might work well for edges, or it can also work well for things like primary or secondary grooves. Next, we have defining instruments. Here's a PKT number 3, and you can see that this one has a cone-like tip. So with a little bit of heat, this instrument may also be used for defining grooves. Next, we will talk about how to smooth and polish your wax-ups. So one of the most useful things that you can use when you're doing these dental wax-ups is to use a strip of nylon. So nylon allows you to achieve a really smooth and shiny finish, which makes for a very nice presentation for your final grading. So keep in mind, if you do use the nylon, it will cut and take away wax, so you can't be too aggressive with it as you are smoothing and polishing. So looking at some of these shots of your carving block exercise, you can see on the upper left how you have excess wax filling up your well. So if you go to the picture right below that, you can see how that might look when you smooth it over with a carving instrument. We want the project to be flat for each well, not convex or concave. And the edge has to stop at the edges of the well, which we will also refer to as the margin. This margin is also going to translate to your tooth die and delineates where your wax must end. So once again, the margin here would be the edges of this circle. So we don't want anything over that edge. When we're carving, you also want to carve from all different directions and be careful not to incorporate the wax shavings back into your wax. It should be smooth and without any striations. So always keep one edge of the instrument beyond the actual material that you're carving so you don't go beyond where you should or dig into the wax. On the right side, you'll see how you can use the nylon. Usually you can just hold it over your finger and then just run it over the wax well or your tooth wax up later on. And that bottom right picture is how it looks after you've smoothed it with the nylon. So it's gotten rid of most of the striations and it's helping it to look a little more shiny. Here is a picture of a waxed up tooth die, smoothed only with nylon. So you can see how it starts out on the upper left being pretty dull and a bit rough, but then after you run it over with the nylon and carve back some of this margin here, because that's some excess, then it comes out very smooth and shiny, as you can see on the right side. This shows you some additional armamentarium that you can use for smoothing and polishing and shining up your wax ups. So if you don't like the nylon or you don't want to use it, you can also use cold water with a cotton ball, or you can use surgical soap on cotton, and that will also give you a very nice finish. You can also use a pinpoint flame from the alcohol torches that we have here in the dispensary for SimLab. But you have to be careful that when you use the pinpoint flame, you don't end up melting off all of your wax. This is an example of how you can polish and how it might look if you use a pinpoint flame with soap and a cotton ball. So the example is actually what you will be doing for your next waxing block project, which is the drip wax block. And this is the final result of what you will show us. So here we just see how it would look if you were to use a flame and soap and cotton on warm wax after you flamed it. So this isn't the only way to get it to look this nice on the lower right, but it's one of the techniques you can use and practice with. We're going to look now at the various heat sources you will be using in order to melt and deliver your wax to your project. While there are several different options of heat sources, the two that will be available to you are the alcohol torch and the whip mix induction heater. We'll start with showing you how to use your whip mix heat zone induction heater, which is assigned and attached to each of your benches. In the back of your induction heater, you will find an on and off switch. When you flip that on, a blue light will indicate that it has turned on. From a front view, you can see that the logo is glowing blue, and you also have a green light in the front bottom there that shows that it is ready and working. A more direct view of the front, I also want to mention that the green light means that there is currently no heat passing through the opening. That green light will only change when you insert some sort of metal source. So in this case, you're going to be using your metal instruments, and as soon as you put the metal within there, it's going to change from green to red, and red will indicate that it is heating up. While it is heating your metal instrument, please do not touch the metal instrument to the soft cup liner inside, because that will start to melt. Make sure you are holding the instrument at the handle and you do not touch the tip or the shank, especially if you've just taken it out of the induction heater. When I say tip and shank, I'm referring to these parts with this as a tip and this as a shank. So those will be the hottest parts of your instrument. Once again, in order to heat your instrument, you will want to hold it within the rubber liner, and you will not want to touch it to the soft cup liner with the hot instrument. You will just be balancing it in the middle. After you've heated up your metal instrument inside of that liner, you will be able to pick up wax because your instrument will be hot. And then you will take that wax that you've picked up and you will deliver it to your project. Keep in mind that the liner is removable, so sometimes you will have wax dripping off into it, and some of these will be cleaner than others. Make sure to try to keep it clean. You can take it out and break the wax out, but also be careful because these rubber liners can tear. If you do have a damaged rubber liner, you can bring it to the dispensary and we can see if we can help you get it cleaned or order some replacement. Sometimes your machine may not be working correctly, so if you notice that the green light is blinking red or that the instrument is not heating, you can try adjusting the sensitivity, or we can help you do that. The area you want to adjust is on the left side of the machine, where you see this plus and minus for the sensitivity. So you will be able to put your screwdriver there and toggle it to the left or right depending on what you need, and then make sure you reset the machine by turning it on and off to see if it's working. This may seem pretty straightforward, but most of the times people forget this step. After you're done waxing and using the induction heater, please make sure to turn the power off when it's not in use, and this will make the blue light turn off as well. So here you see it's glowing when it's on, and then it will not be when it's off. One of the last parts of the armamentarium that we'll introduce to you is the lubrication, because sometimes we don't want the wax to stick on certain areas. We use what is called dye lube, with the dye referring to the tooth dye. On your block project, you will want to just paint that lubrication where we don't want the wax to stick, which will be around the wells. So you don't want to put it inside the well, just on the edges where we will be carving it away, and we don't want excess there. So in lab, you're going to be starting out with the waxing blocks exercises. Make sure you do the wax carving exercise first, which is the one with the wells, and then have the faculty check and make sure that you're doing it correctly and that you're working with the wax properly. After that you've been told that you can move on, then you can go to the drip wax block. After the drip wax block is complete, please have the faculty check both of them and sign off your project sheet for the wax carving and drip wax block together. So when you start off with your carving block project first, you will be doing the dye lube, painting that around the wells for your first step. Next, you will probably use your number 7 or number 31 wax spatula and heating that up in your induction heater. You will pick up some of your wax and you will deliver the wax in increments to your wells so that you can build it up from the bottom. Make sure you blend the layers of wax together with the heat and do not incorporate voids. If you are adding cold wax to hot wax or warm wax to hot wax, your layers will not blend properly. You can overwax the wells just a little bit so that you can carve it back. However, even on these steps, you do not want to go over the edges if you can help it. After you've overfilled your well slightly, you can start to carve it back from all different directions. And you can do this by rotating the wax carving block as you are carving. You are complete with this project when your wax is completely uniform inside of the well with no voids, and you have a very flat, even surface that is well polished. We will have you do a few of those wells and get them perfect before you move on to the next drip wax block project. This is what the drip wax block looks like, and here you will be mainly practicing with making shapes and then going through steps to build a tooth. For this project, you will mainly be using the PKT 1, 2, and 3 to start with the drip wax deliveries. If you do at any point decide that you do not want to use the induction heater or you don't like using the induction heater, you can check out alcohol torches and use the flames from those torches to wax instead. So if you do decide to use a live flame, whether it's from an alcohol torch, a Bunsen burner, or anything else that you might have, you make sure to heat the shank of your instrument and not the tip. Once again, the shank is this portion between the handle and the tip of the instrument, with the tip being the end. And the reason we want to do that is because the shank allows the tip to not be overheated and lets you pick up and work with your wax much more nicely. That being said, we have found that the induction heaters have been very good for using to work with the wax because you get a really nice even distribution of heat throughout the tip of your instrument. So for the drip wax block, you're going to be starting out in that lower right quadrant of exercises, And here you're just learning how to wax cones, which will later become waxing cusp cones. Beneath the cones here, next you can practice building the walls. The last section, which is this one here, is to help practice pooling the wax, which will help you shape cusps and ridges. So make sure you practice in this lower right corner first for those 3 exercises until you are confident that you can control the wax, and then we'll move on to the left column. So when you're starting your wax block project, you want to start off practicing in this section first. Again, that's going to be cusps and cones, building walls, and pooling wax. This section here is just an example of what you might be able to do with it. When you're ready to start the left column, you're actually going to start from the 3rd to last row. So this is the starting point. Here you're going to be waxing all of the main cusp cones, which are the highest points of the tooth, using the example below. So you're going to look at this in order to wax that. After all of those cusp cones are waxed, then you can move to the next structure above. So you're going to start from the 3rd, and then you're going to move up with each step. From the cusp cones, the next step here, that's going to be your triangular ridges. So you're only waxing between the cones that have been formed on that example. After the triangular ridges, we're going to be waxing the cusp ridges and the marginal ridges. We're building the tooth one piece at a time through an additive technique. After this, we'll go to the next row here. And on this row, we're going to fill the holes and contour the teeth. After all of these rows are complete, then we would go back down to the very bottom and use all of that technique that you just learned in each step to wax this row of upper right posterior teeth. And this is what you will be having us do your final check on. If you do have time or interest, you can try waxing up this tooth using the example here. So you'll be waxing this. And then this will be your sign off for the drip wax block. Showing you a close-up of that drip wax block. Here we have the cusps that you wax up first. And then after you finish waxing up the cusps, you would go to the next row above it and start waxing the triangular ridges. So with each row, you're copying the example above of the teeth you are working on. So that's it for the armamentarium and your first 2 wax block projects. Make sure you take your time with these and just try to get the technique right instead of just trying to get it signed off. You'll have a couple of weeks to work on this. Also, if you're having trouble getting the wax or the heat right, just let us know, because we would be happy to help you or show you. And always just ask for help and guidance when you need it. We're always open to your questions, and we want you to feel comfortable with asking them. So thanks for your attention, and looking forward to your work.